Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're going to be talking about two different fandoms, the story of two different fandoms and why they are so different from each other, and also why the difference that I did not really see when I really should have, because it was staring me right in the face before I made my box office predictions for this movie and also when predicting the future of the MCU. So just for those that maybe do not know, I do have indeed a video breaking these things down even further over on the Geeks and Gamers channel. Should be dropping sometime today. But before then, I do want to talk about this a bit because I think it is important for us to understand why this film is doing so well and why it is not following the same pattern that Star Wars did for, The Last Jedi and for Solo. It's important for us to know that difference. Firstly, Captain Marvel is going to be a billion-dollar film. Based on the projections, the fact that it's made $760 million worldwide means that this film is going to range probably anywhere from $1.2 to $1.5 billion, which would put this film in the top 5, if not top 6, highest-grossing MCU films. Some of us look at this and say, how? How can a mediocre film, because objectively speaking, from an objective standard, this is a mediocre to bad film. The fact that you look at the critics' average score and you see that overall it's around a 63, 65%. The fact that you look to the audience rating and it's hovering around the same thing, even though they don't show the fact that it's a 2.8 out of 5 in most of their scale, which puts it out of, again, 58, 60%. You see that almost universal, that 60% range, which is well below average, which is a middle-of-the-road film. Again, if you're going to take 100 and you're going to say 50 is middle of the road and everything below that is below middle of the road, everything above that is higher, is above middle of the road, this is indeed as close as you can get to a middle-of-the-road film. This is also a film that does not need to be made. This is also a film that just does not need to exist at this point in time. Now, everyone's going to try and say, oh, well, it made money, and so therefore Disney is going to, say, oh, well, you know what, if it doesn't need to exist, and why are so many people going to see it? And that is the reason why I'm making this video, and that is the reason why that we're having this discussion. Because what we need to talk about are two audiences here. The reason why this did not go the way that many of us thought it was going to, the reason why this did not perform similar to a Last Jedi or similar to a Solo Star Wars story, even though it might end up making around the same amount as The Last Jedi did, and before you go ahead and say, but look, you see there's even more similarities to the end of the MCU, let me explain to you why that's not going to be true, why Endgame is still going to be successful, and also why the MCU is going to stay strong for a long time, even if they go down an SJW identity politics driven narrative. And it's because of the MCU. It is because of the world that has been built by the MCU. So let's start here with the MCU. On this side of the equation, you have the MCU fans. How did it all start? It all started back with, you had the Incredible Hulk. You also had the first Iron Man movie as well. These are films that did pretty well overall at the box office. The Incredible Hulk did $263.4 million worldwide. It's the only film that actually did not technically make back its budget. You look ahead to the first Iron Man film, and you see that it made $585 million worldwide. Again, a very, very strong start. A very strong start to the MCU films. This is, of course, before it had been taken over completely by Disney. However, it got the ball rolling. Every year, more movies came out. Almost 2 movies every single year. Who were those fans, though, showing up in the beginning? Who were those people making up that $263 million or $583 million? Again, these are all unadjusted worldwide totals for inflation, so that would mean that they're even higher than they are right now. So who were the fans going to see the movies? Most of them were comic book fans. Most of the people going to support those films early on were people who knew of the comics, read the comics, followed those stories, loved those stories, and wanted to go out and support it and see it on the big screen. Yeah, they had problems with some of the decisions that were made. Yeah, they maybe didn't like the fact that you had, Robert Downey Jr. not playing a character like Tony Stark is in the comics, where he is struggling with alcoholism. They kind of hint at it a little bit, but they don't go down that road. They don't really tell that story in any great detail. But what they're able to do is they're able to tell the story and make up for that fact with compelling storytelling and great world building and great character building as well. So we see that happen again year after year after year. Again, 2008, 2009, 2010, etc. For over 10 years now, going into year number 11, they have produced 22 films. In 11 years, they've produced 22 films, which averages out to be about 2 films a year. When you look to that fact, you have to understand the audience changes over that course of time, over that course of history. In the very beginning, you had those hardcore comic book fans that were going out to support the film. But the MCU, especially that when it's being run under Kevin Feige, what it was able to do was it was able to get the tendrils out, to get the MCU mindset out there and appeal to what we described of last night in our live stream, a popcorn fan. It was able to get popcorn fans to come see the movies. No longer were the gigantic numbers coming from a huge majority of Marvel Comics fans. Now, the mass majority, the big numbers of people that were coming out slowly, more and more every single year, were less of the comic fans and more of the normies, as Gary of Nerdrotic's channel has called them, or as I will call them, the popcorn fans. The people who just want to go see a big movie on the big screen with a bucket of popcorn, shove it in their mouth, and just enjoy whatever it is that's on the screen. Some of them may actually even be MCU fans. But you started to see the difference. No longer was it just Marvel fans, Marvel comic fans. Now there was a change. Now there was a transition into MCU fans, Kevin Feige's MCU fans, popcorn fans. And that is the reason why what you see over time is you see all of the films that are being released, no matter how strong the character, no matter how well known the character, is doing well regardless, because the MCU has now gotten it down to a science. Kevin Feige has gotten this down to a science because now he knows, and Captain Marvel to me is proof positive of that. He knows now he does not need to appeal to comic fans anymore. He might throw them a bone every now and then. He might follow similar storylines and story arcs, etc. But he does not have to follow a damn thing that comics fans want, because he knows now he does not need them. The fact that Captain Marvel, which at best, as I said in the very beginning, is a mediocre, middle-of-the-road film, is going to be one of the highest grossing movies in the history of the MCU is absolutely insane. Where is it going to fall? But let's look at the worldwide. Again, these are unadjusted for inflation, so therefore the numbers might be a little bit different. But overall, this is believed to be the top 5 movies. Avengers Infinity War at $2 billion. Marvel's The Avengers at $1.5 billion. Age of Ultron at $1.4. Black Panther at $1.3. Iron Man at $1.2. I said at the very beginning that the range of this film is going to be between $1.2 and $1.5 billion. How do I know that? It's just based off the fact that most movies, and again, you can check the numbers for yourself, tend to make 60% of their entire box office take in the first 2 weeks. We now have those first 2-week totals, and so now we can start to do that predicting. Now we can actually start to predict how much money this is going to make. Anyone that said beforehand, oh, I have the magic formula that's going to find things out, these magic multipliers, yes, sometimes they can be accurate, but what's more accurate, the most accurate, is to wait for those first 2 weeks to go by. The only way that this film, that Captain Marvel, does not make $1 billion, if for some reason these 2 weeks it's made 80% of its entire gross, which hopefully you realize it's just unrealistic to think that this movie made 80%, and it's only going to make 20% going forward. That would be a very small amount of money, and in the number of theaters that it is in, domestically and worldwide, that's unrealistic. So $1.2 to $1.5 billion, very likely going to be what it ends up making, which means that this film will likely end up in the top 5 highest grossing MCU films, with joining the likes of Infinity War, the original Avengers, Age of Ultron, Black Panther, and Iron Man 3. That to me is kind of just disappointing by a lot of measures, because obviously you can look to Age of Ultron, which I personally did not like. You can look to Iron Man 3, which many people thought was divisive, and you can look to these things and say, okay, well, those are some other middle-of-the-road films. Those are some other mediocre films, and I would agree with you. However, I would say that Captain Marvel is worse than any of those films just because, from an objective standpoint, it just doesn't work. I'm sorry, but when your lead character is the most uninteresting person in the world, when her character arc is totally that of a Mary Sue, and when you have no general interest in her at all, I'm sorry, but that's just not good. For a film like that, though, to make $1.2 to $1.5 billion by the end of its run shows you that Kevin Feige knows the system. He knows how things work, and now he's essentially shown he can make any film he wants with any character he wants and can make money off of it. Because guess what? The people that we were hearing, the people that we were the comic fans. We were the fans of the comic book characters. We were the hardcore fans. Many of us are also a part of the Fandom Menace, and are Star Wars fans. And we thought, hey, something happened similar with Star Wars, so therefore we can do it here. So we kept hearing the loud numbers of voices, because it is still a large number of people that came out and supported the #Alita challenge, that came out and said, no, we're done with this nonsense. I'm not going to pay for this garbage. I'm done. I'm stepping out after Endgame. I'm stepping out after this movie. That was indeed a large number of people. So I don't want you to think that, that for some reason, we're a small group. What we didn't realize, or what I didn't realize, is just how large the popcorn fan, MCU fans had become. And that's something I should have seen from the very beginning. I should have looked at and said, look at this rich history. Look at all of this money that has been made worldwide by all of these films. 18 billion, probably going to get close to 20 billion by the end of this year, especially after Endgame, as far as overall box office receipts. Meaning that this series has made over 10 billion in net gains. $10 billion in net profits. That's an insane amount of money. That's an insane amount of profits. And that's not even including the DVD Blu-ray sales, which you know have always been good. That's not even including the merchandise sales or anything else. We know that this franchise has made a lot of money. And so that's the reason why this film is just doing as well as it is, because it's the MCU fans and the popcorn fans that are going out of their way, because guess what? Most of them don't follow the news. They don't care. They don't look in the behind the scenes stuff. They have no knowledge of the comics. They have no knowledge of the changes and how important they are. They see a cat scratching out Nick Fury's eye and they say, that is freaking hilarious, man. It's a cat. It's been a cat this whole time. Instead of saying that breaks continuity and also takes away a very important story from the comics of how he loses it in an actual battle. We know these things. We are interested in researching these things. The general popcorn fans aren't. So that's why the MCU, even if this film ends up making the same exact, even if it makes $1.3 billion exactly, and people say, look, it's going to be just like The Last Jedi and the next movie is going to be bad. I'm sorry, but if you think Endgame is not going to make $1 billion, if this film with all the controversy, if this film with the drops in China, etc., is going to rather break the $1 billion mark and possibly make as much as $1.5 billion, if you don't think that Endgame is going to easily make $2 billion, I'm sorry, but you've kind of lost it. This is indeed a very sad day, because now we're living in the age where mediocre to bad films, as long as they're in the MCU, can make money, are guaranteed profits, guaranteed, and they don't have to listen to the fans anymore. So how is that any different than Star Wars? Why is it that there is this huge difference between the Star Wars fan base and the MCU fan base? It's really simple when it comes down to it. Look at how many less films you have here. Obviously, you can say, but it's been over 30 years in the making. The original Star Wars trilogy, again, that's something that built up so much fan base and so much love. But that's exactly the point. For 30 years, there was a hardcore fan base that was being built up, that would show up. Even for the prequels, still showed up. All the prequels still made money, despite the fact that at best they were mediocre films, and I would even say bad films, even though I look back at them with fondness and laugh at them. But it still was a hardcore fan base that stuck on to Star Wars, that still believed in Star Wars, that still read all the comics, still read all the EU novels, now the so-called Legends novels. And when Disney bought it up, people were saying, oh man, Star Wars is going to be coming back bigger and better than ever with new characters, with the old characters too. We were promised certain things. Even George Lucas himself was promised certain things by Kathleen Kennedy. All of these turned out not to be true. The Force Awakens comes out, huge number, makes billions of dollars at the box office. And everyone thinks to themselves, oh man, Star Wars is back. There, of course, are people who said, I did not like, there were certain things in The Force Awakens I didn't like. And hey, there were certain things that I could criticize too. But for the most part, all of us were very excited for it. Then we had the Rogue One come out and everyone was like, okay, this is a little bit different. I don't know how necessary this is. There were some choices that were made, but hey, whatever. It made $1 billion. Then The Last Jedi came out. And when The Last Jedi came out, it made very clear to those hardcore fans, because guess who they were having at that point? Compare that to 20 plus films over 10 years, and then over a 5-year span, you have about 4 films. Again, about a film every single year. And then you have the short span between The Last Jedi and between Solo. You look at those films and you realize, what have they done to build a new audience? I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Force Awakens, so many people come out. All of the people who are hardcore Star Wars fans came out to support the film. Rogue One, a lot of people went to support this film. It made $1 billion. The Last Jedi, many people thought that this was going to be a continuation of what JJ set up, and instead it ended up being Rian Johnson's own passion project where he decided to do whatever the hell he wanted, no matter what it had an impact on the canon, no matter what it did as far as ruining characters, no matter what it did having so many objective flaws. Didn't care. Made money because guess what? It made over 60% of its entire box office, made nearly 70% of its entire box office in the first 2 weeks, because after the first 2 weeks, people said, okay, I am done with this nonsense. It was The Last Jedi that cut off the hardcore fan base. And what it showed us, and what it tested, was, okay, now we can see. Now Solo is the test. How many fans have now been disenfranchised by The Last Jedi, have been disenfranchised by the Disney-run Star Wars company, with people, directors, actors, etc., calling fans out, calling fans names, and all these other things. Solo Star Wars story comes out, makes $396 million worldwide, $600 million less than any other Disney-run Star Wars project. That was the movie that showed very clearly that they had lost the hardcore fan base, and also that the hardcore fan base makes up a large portion of their money. That is the big difference between Star Wars fandom and MCU fandom. MCU fandom has had 10 years to build up a gigantic fandom, has done 2 films a year, has been building up, making money and making choices, and for the most part doing some really good work, building stories and building characters. And then on the flip side of this, you have Star Wars, which had a great, awesome start to try and build something new while also respecting the old. But then, of course, The Last Jedi comes out and shows they have no respect for the old. And so, unlike in the MCU, where the comic book fans are now no longer relevant, and now they can just simply ignore, as Captain Marvel shows us, and still make money because they've already built up those popcorn fans, Star Wars has not built up that same kind of base. Star Wars has not built that same kind of coalition that's going to go out and support a movie no matter what it is. And that's the reason why Episode 9 is not going to be in the same position as an Endgame, or even as a Captain Marvel at this point. Star Wars still is very much likely not going to make $1 billion. And the reason why is because of the fandoms being so different. Because the MCU was able to build the trust and build up a new coalition of fans called the MCU popcorn fans, while Star Wars had a fan base, decided to alienate that same fan base, and was not able to build a new fan base in the process. Because if they were, guess what? Solo would not have lost money. Making $396 million worldwide is anemic. Take even out how much they spent on that movie, how much they ballooned that budget, and you still have a loss. This is the difference that we see. Kathleen Kennedy on one side, who has no idea what the hell she's doing, terrible at world building, terrible at putting things forward, choosing directors, choosing storylines to bring things forward. Kevin Feige knows what he's doing, puts things forward, knows how to drive things forward, knows how to get the audiences out there, and has now shown very clearly that he can make any film he wants. He can have the MCU bring in any character, any story arc, any identity politics that they want, and no matter what, it's going to make money. Because there are enough normies, enough popcorn fans out there in the MCU now to support it with whatever it is that they're going to do. Endgame's going to make over $2 billion very easily. Could be one of the highest grossing films of all time. Captain Marvel is going to be one of the highest grossing Marvel films of all time. And it's not because our voices didn't matter. It's not because we were small in number. It's because the mass, gigantic coalition of normies, of popcorn fans that Kevin Feige's MCU has been able to bring in is so massive that even people like me and many others just did not really understand or even see that was what was going on. Because let me tell you this right now, had I understood that, had I really paid attention to the trends, had I really paid attention to all these kinds of things, I would have said from the very beginning that this film was going to be successful, but I didn't. I had my blinders on. I said, this is going to be just like Star Wars, but that was foolish of me to do. And for anyone whose hopes I may have gotten up, for anyone who feels like I betrayed them or, that I don't know what I'm talking about, hey, I made a mistake. We're all human. We make mistakes. And I own the mistake. I own the mistake of not seeing the fandoms as I should. There is a clear difference. Now that I see that, now we are able to look forward to what's coming up very soon. And I hope I've made it very clear why the fandoms are so different and also why Star Wars is not going to be the same. For the people out there, because you're going to see it, the Scott Mendelsons, the John Campions, all of them are going to try and say, oh, this proves without a shadow of a doubt that, the trolls, the people who don't like these films because they're just racist and sexist, living in their mama's basement, etc., that they don't mean anything and that they don't count for anything. Maybe in the MCU, you are correct. Not to mention the fact that most of these people you're talking about aren't actual trolls, but are actual real-life people who are just tired of identity politics being in film. So you might be right on the MCU fan, that it's not going to affect their box office. It's not going to affect their bottom line when everything's said and done. And that's just because, again, you have this giant coalition of people that don't really think, that just want to sit mindlessly and engage in film and just watch and watch and watch and watch and consume and consume and consume and consume and don't really care much about much else of anything. So yeah, good job, MCU. You've done that. Star Wars, though, different. They haven't built that coalition. They have not built that fan base, and they've alienated their hardcore fans in the process. And the hardcore fans are not showing up. The hardcore fans are done, have written things off. You're going to see a very different story come December. Will the film make money? Probably. Because general audience members are still going to show up to those kind of films no matter what. The popcorn fans are still going to show up to it no matter what. But what you don't have is a dedicated fan base. You don't have a non-canon dedicated popcorn fan base like you do for the MCU. Number of movies is different, number of investments is different, and overall, number of interest is obviously very different as well. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Do you think that these differences between the two fans was clear from the beginning? Did you see this going forward? Were you someone who did not like the identity politics of Captain Marvel but thought, hey, I'm sorry, but the MCU is just gigantic. It's going to make money. If you were to like that, please let me know in the comments below. And also let me know your own thoughts about all of this. Because as I said, Again, when it came to predicting this, I made a giant mistake. Again, my overall estimate was between $450 and $650 million, but that was me, again, assuming. That was me assuming it had a Star Wars-like fan base and forgetting that the MCU is an entirely different animal altogether. I know that going forward. And so in the future, when the MCUs come out, I'll obviously keep that in mind. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching today. Please, if you like this video, smash that like button. Give us a subscribe as well. It helps us out a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.